subtitles, and people who watch my videos seem to like them. However, for this video there's just so much to talk about, so I thought it would be easier to just do a voiceover. So I'm gonna try to get over my embarrassment and just get it done. And yeah, I hope you like the video. So I wanted to make this because I've never done a children's book before, and it was a huge learning curve, and maybe my journey will be useful for others who are thinking of making their first book as well. So the reason I wanted to try my hand at making a picture book is because around the beginning of last year I realized that this is a field or an area of illustration which I'm very much interested in and would like to pursue, and there were a number of things feeding into this, but one of the largest factors was visiting the MA Children's Book Illustration final exhibition last year, which I have a video about, and it was just so inspiring that it made me much more interested in this field than before. And so I needed to test one, if I could do this very sequential illustration work, because it was somewhat different from what I've done before, and two, whether I would actually enjoy doing this type of work and would want to develop my practice in this direction. A lot of the sketches that you're seeing here I've already shared in my first video about this whole children's book illustration process. I believe that video was posted in May, which is a long time ago. So yeah, this whole process, I think I started in February and I finished December, so roughly a year. I did take a few breaks over the summer and when I had other projects going on, but yeah, it's a big commitment. So yeah, these sketches are just very initial tests of the environment, what I want it to look like, and the characters. One very challenging aspect, especially at the beginning, was making the story fit into the standard 32 pages. And at the same time making it interesting enough to fill that amount of space. And at the end I ended up having to cut every character except for the main little bird, the puffin, and that can seem a bit disappointing because the whole story actually started with the bear, who's a baker, and originated from his storyline, but I realized that his character, the bear, it's an old, like, grumpy bear, versus the puffin, it's this cute young little bird. So I thought maybe the bird should be the focus of the story because they might be more relatable for children. But yes, I have not given up on Bruno the bear, and I will make a separate story for him. But yeah, so one of the things that I struggled with the most was I was trying to fit too many characters and too much story into this format. I really wanted to make it the standard 32 pages because I have sent this out to publishers, and I thought I didn't want the length of the story to be the reason I get rejected. So yeah, it was important for me to have this like standard size. I have since realized that you can also do slightly longer picture books. So maybe I will try that in the future, but at the same time I feel like it is a helpful restriction to work with, especially in the beginning, because even so, the 32 pages, it means that it's 12 spreads, I think. Anyways, it's a lot of spreads to work through as well, so there's still just so much work, even with this limited page numbers. So I decided to come up with my own story, which is a whole thing of its own. And despite the final simplicity, it is very difficult to write a children's story, perhaps exactly because it has to be the right balance between simple but at the same time engaging and relatable and interesting for both the children and the adults reading the story to the children. And in retrospect, perhaps I shouldn't have started both writing and illustrating my own story at the same time, but instead pick a classic fairy tale or an already written children's story to illustrate. But I did figure it out at the end, but it's a lot of things to do all at once, because you not only have to figure out the visual aspects of how everything will work, but also the structure and the diction of the story. So If you're thinking about starting your own children's book, I would recommend picking a story which is already written, so that way you only have to focus on the visual work involved in this whole process, which is, believe me, it's plenty to do, so you'll still have a lot of work to do. At some point I figured out one method of making, which was creating quite detailed and realistic graphite drawings on paper and then coloring them in digitally. And I've worked through a large chunk of the story this way and spent so many hours and days working in this style, and it was a very enjoyable way of working. However, at some point I realized that something felt off about this style, and the pages just, to me, felt a bit too stiff and too dusty. And I had friends and family look at them and they really liked it, but I didn't. I wasn't satisfied with them, so I decided to change. And by this point I've done so much work in this style that it felt a bit frustrating. However, and it wasn't even the fact that I would have to change and then redo all this stuff, but that my work wasn't living up to my standards. But at the same time, I've learned in the couple years that I've been working to kind of distance myself from my work a little bit and not take it too personally when something isn't working. And so I just decided to put this aside. I could always come back to it and instead test other ways of working. And yeah, I think it's a helpful mindset to adopt, to view different styles of working as tests, and then kind of having a slightly objective point of view, or just stepping away from your work, assessing it, and then proceeding based on a more objective perspective rather than taking your work very, very personally. Of course, it's always going to be personal, but at the same time, it is also work. So you have to try to assess it by a professional standard if you want to make this your career. If it's just for fun, then I think that's a slightly different question. Anyway, so I ended up trying a few different ways of working, which you'll see here, and it took me a long time to realize that it's not just the visual aspect of the work that wasn't quite the right fit, but I actually needed to rework and restructure the story. And so it was at this point that I significantly simplified the whole storyline, and I cut out all of the other characters and made Poppy the Puffin the sole character. And then also just changed the rhythm of the story to fit better into the standard 32-page structure. And this way I was able to develop a more coherent visual style as well, because the written aspect of the work was also more coherent. Before I cut it down, the story was almost 1,000 words, and I cut it down to 200. So it was a quite drastic change, but it felt like a huge revelation and it made a huge difference. I don't think I would have been able to finish the story if I didn't make this huge restructuring. Around this time, before I restructured, I felt quite lost. But after reworking the story, I was able to develop a quite limited color palette, and also a significantly simplified visual language. And I just decided to stick to this one way of working and just get it done, because otherwise I felt like I just never have a finished project in my hands. I always recalled one of my tutors from uni saying that artists don't need inspiration, they need a deadline. In this case, that felt quite true, because I really wanted to get this project done in 2024. So I wanted to get it done before going home for Christmas, and it was fast approaching. So I just decided to just sit down, stick to this way of working. I've had the color palette, I had the story, and just finish the pages. The important thing which fed into this was that I had to stop constantly doubting myself and doubting my work, and whether this, a certain way of working would work across all of the different pages, and or how amazing it would be or whatever. I just needed to get it done. Yeah, one of the biggest lessons I learned through making this project was not to take my work so seriously and not to expect the work to be amazing all the time, and especially since this was my first picture book project. Obviously it's not going to be the best. I was figuring it out as I went. I didn't have any professional help or any tutors look at my work, so I had no professional feedback. It was only my family and friends who looked at it. So that's also one of the reasons why it took so long, because every decision was made by me and all of the reflections had to be developed by me. That's not the right way to put it, but anyway, I mostly took this project as a learning opportunity rather than it has to be this amazing thing and I'm gonna get my first book published and it's gonna make me an established children's book illustrator. That's not going to happen. I've sent this book out to publishers, but I doubt it's gonna get published, and that's okay, to be honest, because even so I learned so much, and I've also learned, which was my goal, to be honest, with this project, that I do want to do this. I do want to make more picture books, and I would love this if it was my main career. But that also, it takes a lot of hard work and a long time. But at least I started, and I finished this book, and I'm on my way in this very long whole life journey. Yes. Okay, that's a lot of rambling.